today's webinar titled Grow, Keep, Lead, Workplace Strategies for Public Procurement. I'm your host, Julia McElroy. Thank you for spending time with us today. This is the second installment of our Procurement Talent Management series. You can find episode 1 on NASPO's YouTube page. The National Association of State Procurement Officials is a nonprofit association dedicated to advancing public procurement through leadership, excellence, and integrity. Here on the Research and Innovation team, we work to improve the profession by sharing expertise, fostering learning, and promoting innovative best practices in public procurement through webinars like these. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. You can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you'd like to ask our presenters a question, you can type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A session. At the close of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a very brief survey. Today's presentation is good for 1 contact hour. To receive your certificate, simply complete the survey following the presentation. Your feedback is valuable to us at NASPO, and we appreciate your responses. With that, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. We're honored to have Emily Quigley. Emily is the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer for the Procurement Education Team for the state of North Carolina, and Kristina Sligh. Kristy is the Training and Development Director for the state of South Carolina Division of Procurement Services. NASPO is excited to have Emily and Kristy with us today. Emily, let's begin with you. What does an effective onboarding program for public employees look like? And how can agencies ensure new hires are set up for success from day one?
Hi, Julia. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I think what makes an effective onboarding program for public employees is also what makes a public procurement effective, which is preparation and communication. And we can sprinkle in there a little bit of patience. I think that's always necessary in everything we do. For the 15 years, I was a public school educator. And so when you're teaching, you quickly learn that the time you invest in classroom management up front, early on at the beginning of the year, it pays off all year long. And I think that also applies here when we're talking about onboarding. The time we take and the preparation into onboarding someone well, it builds that relationship up front and it tends to pay off in the long run. I know we'll kind of really dig deep into what that might look like and terms of retention and all of that later on in this webinar, but as well as a lot of other things that I could focus on with this initial question. So I'm just going to touch on a couple key points there: communication and preparation. I do think that we need to keep in mind that preparation begins prior to day one. So making sure that all this effort is made prior to day one, that all of the hardware is in place, parking, badging, software access. I'm going to tell a quick little story about my first day in my first hybrid scheduled job outside of teaching. And my first day was going to be a Monday. And on Friday, my manager reached out and said, "Are you going to be working from home on Monday? Because that's our normal work from home day." So needless to say, I did not have a device. I did not have login information. I had no idea what I was doing. And so in the end, I obviously had to come into the office and get all that information set. But it kind of set the tone that I was maybe inconveniencing that person by having to come in on an off day. So it's always just something to keep in mind, is making sure we're communicating the expectations and kind of thinking ahead to that day one and not just, oh, it's day one, it's here. What do we have to do? So that preparation for sure. Let's see, moving into communication, making sure that there is easy access to all the information somebody might need. So in North Carolina, we have what we call an internal manual. This has staff listings, links, policies, procedures, everything in a one-stop shop. And we're looking at kind of moving that information along with other information into something more like a RISE module or something that can be put into the LMS with a little bit easier of access. Again, just as a one-stop shop for our people to be able to access everything Something to keep in mind is no matter what this kind of document is, whether it's a PDF or a RISE module or a website, to make sure we always note that it's a live document and not a static document, because things are constantly changing. And so you kind of have to find that right person on your team, in your department, in your division, that's going to be that person to update that. And I'll kind of touch on that a little bit more later on as well. But on top of um, our internal manual, which I talked about, we also have something in North Carolina that our operations systems and support team has created called PCOR, which is the Procurement Community of Resource and Engagement. And this is a place for more of our agencies as well, right? It's a one-stop shop for them to access procurement, like it says, resources. And it's also a place for engagement. So we have our internal onboarding stuff, but we also want to make sure that we're supporting those agencies as well. So this is a way that we can kind of allow for that access for our agencies throughout North Carolina. Let's see. So communication, preparation, making sure that, so in North Carolina, we have what is called an embark meeting. And embark, if you know anything about North Carolina, we like our acronyms here. It stands for entering, mind blowing, and really cool, but cool with a K. So embark PC. So embarking on your first week, your first day at PNC. And in this meeting, we have the new hires, we have our leadership meeting, we have our office managers, and it gives everybody a chance to meet, put a face to a name. It allows our new hires to really just get an idea of what we do at PNC, purchase and contract, and who we are. And it opens up those lines of communication, and it kind of gives a big idea or a big picture of who we are. And I think that's really important for new hires to understand, is that big picture, how work moves through the organization, how decisions are made, how their role is going to support that overall mission, and what their value is in that. I actually, this makes me think of our North Carolina certification program. It's called NCCM. It's the North Carolina's contract manager. And at the end of the certification, we ask people to turn in a final reflection. This certification covers everything that's in the SIMBOK, actually. So there's a lot of things that may not be specific to the person who's taking that certification. You know, it goes anywhere from leadership to learn to pre-award, award, post-award. So not everything that's covered in there is going to be something part of that person's role. But what we do see is that final reflection doesn't say, this was a lot of information I didn't really need to know. It was that big picture. What I was talking about is knowing your role within that bigger picture. So I think that also reminds me a little bit of that onboarding, helping that person know where is your role within the bigger picture of our division, of our team. The same way our participants see their role inside of procurement as a whole. So a lot of that communication, preparation, sprinkle in there a little bit of patience.
Emily, all fantastic points. And I think I especially like that you said patience, because it's on both sides. The person is new. I was just almost like tired listening to all the things you have to learn in your department, right? It's all valuable. It's all important. No new employee is going to know everything on day one. And when I used to train my staff, I would say that you're a new buyer. There's a lot to learn. You'll get it, but be patient with yourself. And then the person training you also needs to be patient. So I think those are just really great points. So Christy, how can onboarding and training programs strike the right balance between teaching regulatory requirements and building practical real world procurement skills?
So to build on what Emily was just saying, yeah, onboarding and training, it needs to give people the sense of why they're doing what they're doing. So two things when we talk about training and development, two things tend to motivate adult learners: the with them, or the what's in it for me, and the why. All right. So we need to know what it needs to be, not just practical training. Any training needs to be practical and immediately useful, not just required. There's no use of teaching someone something that they won't use for 6 months because they're not going to remember it once they get to it. And that's why it's really important to have a lot of the informational pieces online, or a able to be accessed at the ready. Um, Especially anything that's not going to change soon. This is where you get into like micro learnings and e-learnings and all of that. Something that people can refer to, even job aids. How helpful would it be just to have a list of acronyms that are used in procurement? Because I don't have a procurement background. Some of the acronyms that procurement used, I used in my old job for completely different things. So, like, just having those kinds of things that can be assigned as necessary or prerequisites to classes, so helpful when you're just starting out. Formal classes are really good ways of doing info dumps. If you want to impart a lot of information at once. But again, whatever's being taught needs to be practical and hands-on. If you have instructor-led classes, I encourage using learner guides. So those are more than just handing out slides to people and letting them take notes. Those are actually something where they can fill in, like fill in the blank or matching or stuff like that. We've used them for several of our classes and we get a lot of good feedback for them. It it helps people keep focus, but also writing and reading practically, like not on a screen, it wires your brain differently. So it helps information stick. You can also establish mentorship, either peer to peer or um, a manager to employee. And like Emily was saying, open communication is so important. As a reminder, being available as a manager is not just I have an open door policy. You really need to make that effort to check in, especially with your new people, frequently, and actually communicate with them, because I had a manager that's like, I'm always available, and then he was never at his desk. So you know like, that's not necessarily great. If you are worried about being interrupted, I do suggest calendaring things and setting those expectations of like, check my calendar. And you can either have open hours, like office hours, like professors do, or you can have focus time or both, scheduled on your calendar so that your team knows when they can go bug you when that might be better or not.
That's a great point. So, as a former librarian, for you, Christy, and Emily, as a former teacher, this is not going to be a big surprise, but learning is foundational. Again, as I would say to my staff, you can't understand Spanish 300 at the university level if you have not mastered Spanish 100, right? So it's steps, it's incremental, it's over time, and again, you have to be patient with yourself as you're going through that process. So, to what extent should procurement, onboarding, and training be standardized across an agency or state? And where's flexibility most important?
So I know I had mentioned the North Carolina Contract Manager certification, and this is standard across the state. So all state professionals are required to take it within the first year. And I do think it is really helpful to give everybody that same baseline, that same procurement foundation within that 1 year of hire so we know where everybody's base is, right? And then you can build off of that. So outside of that certification, I mean, we obviously you need to have standardized trainings with ethics, laws. People need to understand the general statutes, the administrative code. For North Carolina, that's how it goes into the procurement manual. And then you can allow for flexibility when it comes to, your agency specific procurement manual, your agency specific procedures, which should be located in that procurement manual. Role-based responsibility is obviously that is going to be a wide range of roles that are involved. And I kind of think of that as like my training brain thinks of it as like we have our core curriculum and then our optional modules that are that flexible piece. So I had mentioned earlier about the process of us kind of including all of our things into one LMS module and how that would work. And, we would have that core curriculum, that standardization. But then from there, we could also break it off. We have 5 different teams of people at purchase and contract. And so, for example, somebody in risk and compliance, they're going to need different information than somebody in strategic sourcing. And even within our strategic sourcing team, we have different levels. We have procurement specialist 1, who are going to need something different than specialist 2, who's going to need something different than the 3, and who will need something different than a manager. So putting it all into a place that allows for that standardization, but then also that flexibility is a nice way to do it. And I know that's not possible for everybody, but just kind of understanding that having one procurement foundation that everybody kind of gets, I think that's really important.
No, great point. I think that if you hire someone from DOT into central procurement and they were a buyer 2 there, for example, then you know that they have this baseline already mastered, right? And you're not having to start at square one with them. So I think that's a really great point. So for any of us who have spent any time in procurement, we know that we have varied backgrounds. So with many new hires, they don't come into the position with a procurement background. So what strategies work best to quickly build competency and confidence in these individuals?
Well, when someone starts, there's 2 things that you really need to know. You need to know what they're going to need to know. Like um, as you're planning out your new hire, what are they going to need to know? And that's generally your compliance and regulations and stuff. And then what are they going to have to do? And that's generally your practical hands-on stuff. Once you kind of have that aligned, like Emily was saying, they use within the first year. Once you have that timeline, then you can start charting out a training plan, right? And this is not going to be the same for everybody because like you said, some people are going to have strong training backgrounds, or some strong procurement backgrounds. Some people are not. But whatever you do, don't ever throw them into the deep end. Um, Regardless of whether they have 20 years of experience at a different agency. And give them achievable tasks at first and grow complexity as things go along and grow. Formal classes at this point are great, but be mindful of overdoing it. Keep in mind that your mind is like a sponge, and if you pour way too much into it, it's just all going to flow out. And again, timely, relevant to what they're doing first. Um, a lot of times we have a really good intentions by saying, okay, you're going to take all of the training, and then it's just an overload. And it ends up kind of burning people out. Um, it may not always be practical, but mentorship is always a really great thing. If you can assign someone a peer mentor, and this is someone that they can just always go to and ask questions. We do a lot of team shadowing as well. When people first start, hey, I'm doing a pre-bid, come along, those kinds of things. But having that point of contact within the organization is always great. And it allows both the employee to feel secure, but also it gives that mentor who's probably been there for a little while an opportunity to increase their leadership skills and their management skills. Um,
Yeah. Sorry, Christy, I just
oh, go
wanted
ahead.
to add on to that sometimes when we look at assigning mentors, it's usually, the person who's been there really the
Yeah,
longest, but sometimes it's nice to get somebody who maybe is a mid-level to start
yeah,
mentoring because it'll help them with their leadership. It will also help them learn as they move along with it as well. So
yeah,
I think we don't always look towards somebody who's maybe been there the longest or somebody who's the most helpful because that
yeah,
person's going to be helpful no matter what. So trying to get some other people on board when thinking about mentorship.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really great point. Um, and then the other thing to remember is that you hired this person for a reason. So what skills do they bring to the table? Do they have a really great vendor background? Do they have a different perspective because they've worked at an agency? Have they done things? We don't do small procurements in Division of Procurement Services. Like we don't go below $50,000. So, people who have done that have more experience doing that than, and can bring different perspectives. It's also great just to have people to open the door to kind of ask questions. Nobody has a better perspective than a brand new person. Nobody. When you've got someone, so have that, and don't be defensive about it. We like our ruts. Our ruts are very comfortable. It's very comforting to be and to do exactly how you've always done it and stuff. But if someone comes along and is like, why do we do it that way? Either have an explanation for them or, you know, the explanation can't just be because it's always been that way. Seriously consider change. And then I also think it depends on what you're hiring someone to do. We have teams that are procurement adjacent, as I like to call them, like the training team. Our training team is part of a but bigger business operations team that includes our finance people who work with the vendor spend and our vendor registration folks and our communication folks. And so we have a whole support team here. We don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of putting out a solicitation. I mean, training does, but the rest of the people don't need to know the ins and outs of putting out a solicitation, but they do need to know what we do. Like Emily said, not only does that give them a sense of purpose and why they're here and what this whole division does, but it also allows them to grow. We've had several people who have slid over to the procurement side because they've made the relationships and because they've learned enough and because they actually just grew interested in doing it. So we do a lot more promoting from within sometimes than we do picking people with diverse backgrounds initially. Like we tend to pull from other agencies or whatever.
So
And Julia, in your
I'm sorry,
first,
Emily, go ahead.
that's okay. In your first webinar, and you could probably help with Byron. I don't know what state he's in,
Louisiana.
but he mentioned that sometimes when you're looking to hire, it may not be somebody who knows procurement well, but it may be someone who can learn quickly, somebody who can adapt quickly, problem solving, communication skills. So when we're looking at those non-traditional backgrounds, if we can focus on something like that versus procurement, sometimes that's a better fit.
Yeah.
Not always.
Identifying KSAs is really, really important. Knowledge, skills, and abilities. Identifying those are really, really important. One of the things that we did actually when we started looking at retooling our certification program was take a look at the job descriptions for the state, the PDs, and see, is there a clear path to level up within the state? What do people need to actually know as a buyer one versus as a procurement manager one? What are the steps to get there? So once, I worked with a team of procurement directors to do that. And then also what should the compensation be and all of that stuff. So like I actually worked with a team of procurement directors to do that when we first started doing this. This was pre-COVID, so take it with a grain of salt. That sort of threw a wrench in everything. But yeah, like knowing those pathways for advancement is huge. And Emily, I'm going to throw it over to you because your internship pipeline is phenomenal. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we can pop into that mentorship and peer learning. So in North Carolina, if anybody had watched any of the Cronin webinars earlier this year, North Carolina had one about their internship program, PAC app. And we host, I don't know the exact number because it changes every year, but I will say a good number would say about 4 interns every year. So some of those are just 10 weeks in the summer. Some of them ride into 11 months into the school year where they have limited hours. And even we've had some follow into another school year as well. And out of I'm not sure the total number of interns we've had, but 6 of them as of, I believe 6, and David might correct me if I'm wrong here, have stayed on as full-time employees. And so I attribute a lot of that to part of this onboarding, right? We involve them in our Embark meetings. We involve them in this communication, this preparation that we do just for our new hires. We also do that with our interns. So they feel supported from the beginning. They feel that mentorship. They feel like they have value in what they do and they want to stay on. So that is I think that is one of the key things in our internship. We have one NASPO intern, but we also have interns from other places as well throughout North Carolina. So it's been really helpful to see also, like you said, there's nobody with a better perspective than somebody coming on new, and they're young and they're fresh out of college or still in college, right? So they're going to give us some really good information moving forward with this onboarding program and training as well.
And as Christy pointed out, sometimes they'll ask a question like, oh, why do we file by requisition number versus like PO number, for example? That's a question I had many years ago and was explained like that's the beginning of the process. So that's why we file in that way. So it made sense. Also, speaking about internship, if for those participating in the webinar, if you're considering an internship program, NASPO has the perfect webinar coming up for you. It's August 10th, and we'll have the link in the chat, but it's well worth it. It's just a 30-minute webinar on how to create an internship program. Okay, so let's pivot to certification for a moment. How valuable are professional certifications in public procurement, and how should agencies incorporate them into career development pathways?
All right. Well, obviously, Christy and I will probably have a lot to say about this because we're both in that training field. As a lead of the procurement education team, I am a little biased in answering that this is extremely important for that professional development and that certification. But something we want to be really careful about is not just certification for credentials, but certification to learn and to improve and to strengthen being a procurement professional. And I think that's something not only we have to think of with ourselves when we go into these professional developments, but when our staff attends professional development, making sure that we're following up on that, right? Are you getting something out of this? Is it strengthening your skills in your role? Kind of where are we going to go from there? And part of that question, I think that you are asking is a little bit about how that can continue through with maybe different roles, or so in an ideal world, we have complete training, right? You're going to complete that training. You're going to earn your certification. You're going to apply your skills, and you're going to advance your role, or maybe you're going to advance your pay. When we're in state government, that's maybe a little bit harder, right? That last part, advancing your role, advancing your pay, that may not be available. There's some depending on what agency you're in or what team you're in, there may not be an advanced role to go to, right? And so that's definitely something to consider. And I think Christy may touch on that a little bit later as well. But in North Carolina, especially, we have a very encouraging environment for professional development. And we have about 40 employees, and 7 of them are CPPO certified. 6, I think, are CPPB certified. I think I'm getting all those letters right there, lots of P's in there. And then everybody in purchase and contract, or most everybody, has their North Carolina certifications, which is 3. We have the North Carolina Purchaser, North Carolina Purchasing Officer, and North Carolina Contract Manager. So I think we're very lucky to be in an environment that really encourages that. We also have a really strong program within our state that has like a leading at all levels training and advanced skills for managers, and the certified public manager as well, that's offered from our Office of State and Human Resources. Those are also highly encouraged within our office to take. I will give a shout out to the PPA Leadership Academy. That is a wonderful program. If anybody's wondering about taking it, it's really great. Highly encourage you to take it. Again, that's encouraged in our team as well, to take some of those trainings. I don't know. I'm wondering, Julia or Christy, if you have anything to kind of add on about where our hands are tied when it comes to advancing role or advancing pay for certification.
Well, I agree with you, Emily, that I'm leaning in a little bit because my voice was soft, which has never been said by anyone ever. Ask my husband. Anyhow, so you're absolutely right that as a department, you have little control when it comes to the amount that is allocated by the state, right? So I worked at a university for many, many years. And so we were an agency of the state. And every year we'd wait to see, is there going to be an amount given for increases or for promotions, et cetera? And some years it was zero. So we were super happy when it was two or greater. But anyhow, so you don't always have control, or you have very little control of how much money is allocated there. But I think having the awareness of Jane wants to be promoted, she should be promoted. When there are funds available, let's make sure that she is compensated. Because I know there's a lot of conversation that it's not all about money, but a lot of times it is about money. And that's part of the reason why people leave one agency and go to another. So I think just being cognizant of what's available and when it is available, making efforts to make sure that folks who have been promoted or should be promoted are receiving compensation.
And yeah, I'll also add to that, even though it's hard to see people leave, we should really encourage, not encourage them to leave, but we should applaud them if they find, a position that is an advanced role, or because of that certification, they now have more skill in this area. So as much as we want to keep them and hold on to those people, we should also be excited when they do find positions that maybe meet those skills that they've been working on.
Oh, I 100% agree. I was actually at the state of North Carolina's yearly procurement meeting, NCP, and did a session on how to kind of increase your value personally, professionally. And one of the things I talked about was certifications, and there's many values to certification, but one of them is like with your degree, it's always yours and it will go with you wherever you go. And so there's value in having that. So if you left North Carolina and went to the state of Texas, for example, they could see that you might still have to take Texas's exams, but they can see that you have accomplished that. So, there's that, in my opinion, there's value there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to add on one more thing, is that because the environment in our office is so encouraging to learn more and do more, we actually have seen a lot of people. I won't name names, but throw an example of actually one of our interns who has moved up a couple of times and now is still seeking to do work, even though they're not in an upper position, to do work that maybe a position above them would do, to learn more and do more. So it just kind of creating that support in that environment is really important.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a question. We're going to address the first question in just a moment, but how often should procurement staff attend internal procurement related trainings? I'll have both of you address this. As a former director, I would say, like every time I ask you to, I guess, right? I mean, if I have a scheduled training and I need for you to attend, then do so. But beyond that, Emily, Christy, what do you think there?
Christy, do you want to?
I think that it's always good to, if something changes, obviously update, right? But you're gonna get different things out of classes at different points in your career. I am not a one and done. I took an RFP class 25 years ago, and therefore I can now do RFPs. You maybe have learned enough on the job that you do that, but there's always like we have people that come through our classes that have 10 and 15 years of experience, and we're teaching them new things within that class because we've changed the way that evaluation works, or we changed, different ways that you can talk about things. The statute changed and the this and the that. So there's always a way to, or there's always a reason to kind of send people back to training. Now, is there a set schedule? That depends on the person. I would suggest that if people aren't doing, there every other field, you have to do CEUs. You have to do continuing education credits to keep your certification. Why is that not the case? Or, I mean, it is for the B and the O, right? But if that's not the case for certification within your state, then, there's still, I think, a value to that of maybe take a class or two. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about, you know, RFP or contract management. There's a lot going on in procurement right now. And there's a lot of different options. Or, as Emily mentioned, there's tangential, like you can do leadership or management or any of that through a lot of the organizations as well, and take it with your peers. So there's a lot of different options for people to continue their growth. Sitting down and being draconian and saying, well, everybody has to have 12 hours isn't necessarily great. What another thing that when I came on board in 2017, we were using the NASPO funds for um, for our training budget, and those changed every year. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're going to have an earmarked like per head for training in the thing. So if someone wants to work on their training, we encumbered funds for specifically for training within our annual budget. And we decided, like, I think it was $1,200 a head. So if someone's working on something and it is expensive, the agency can go ahead and plan on paying for that. And it's not tied to just the NASPO funds, which may or may not be there, depending on other things.
So you touched on this a little bit, but what does a strong ongoing training program look like, especially as procurement evolves with data, technology, AI, policy changes? And I'll touch here on what Jackie put in the Q&A, without people feeling job threatened as well.
Yeah. So the biggest challenge that we're facing is basically keeping up with the pace of change, right? And I think that it almost feels like every day there's a different looming issue. Right now, obviously, the scuttlebutt is all AI stuff. Um, but AI to me, and this is a personal opinion, and of course, if I could predict the future, I would have won the Powerball by now. But this feels like another faux threat where, we were told, oh, Google will replace libraries or e-readers will replace books. And, in some ways, yes, but they've become tools, right? And I think that's where we're headed with AI. I think that the threat of AI is more, um, well, it's twofold. The first is that people want it to be more than it is. And so they're not necessarily thinking critically. You have to be an expert to use AI because it's going to give you an answer regardless of we're done with the days of like I couldn't find an answer for you. It's going to give you an answer regardless of whether it makes it up or not. And sometimes it's completely fluffy. It's like, oh, you want an almond cake? Have you tried cyanide? Arsenic? Like there's a lot of historical precedent. You know, so like you do have to know enough to be able to discern what's real and what's not with AI. But a lot of people want it to be more than it is. So my fear is that someone, and of course in South Carolina, there's a lot of motivation for, cutting cost and all of that. And I fear that some legislator somewhere is going to say, well, why are we paying all of these people what we're paying them um, to to do this job when we can hire college kids directly out of USC for 30% less and have them just put prompts into AI and it'll do it for them. And it's not going to be efficient and it's not going to be great, but we're going to lose it that way. Um,
Yes, but until the lawsuit comes.
yeah,
Anyway, we
uh, but the best thing that you can do, truly, the best thing that you can do for your people is teach them how to use resources. Whether that is the code book, whether that is Google, whether that is AI. Now we're locked down on AI. We can't use chatbots or anything like that. But whether that is AI, whatever it is, using that critical thinking and learning how to use those resources effectively and where they are and how to do it efficiently, that's the biggest thing that you can teach right now to keep up with the pace of change. Um, I've been working on adding critical thinking into a lot of our classes, our ethics class. I want to add it more into our legal class of here are the terms and conditions. What happens if you leave this one out or put this one in? Or whatever. What are the possible ramifications of that? And I think there needs to be a shift away from telling people what things say and what things mean to having them kind of figure it out and work through it. Um, Ideally, training departments are going to be able to offer new offerings as soon as, and address topics as they arise. But most states have really small or no training departments. And this is where we can work with each other, work with cohorts, work with NASPO, work with an IGP, and keep up that way. Because a lot of times, like NASPO is on the cutting edge or, whichever, and you can go to a webinar about it, even if you can't offer something yourself. You can at least market that to your staff. Um,
we appreciate that, Christy, by the way. So just a little segue here to one of our questions. So with all this change that's going on, and we keep hearing that AI will eliminate transactional, repetitive kind of duties, how are you seeing your departments keep morale up?
I
I
don't,
don't, I
Go
don't
ahead.
really think that's really even much of a conversation in our department. Um, we all know we're very valued, and the work that we do is valuable. And so whether I'm not part of that conversation or not, but we have a great CPO who understands what we do and the hard work that we do, and he just keeps us uplifted with all of that.
I don't think it's a conversation here either. In fact, when I bring it up, it is kind of taught like, haha, we're the experts. It's like, well, yes, but do people know? And that's where you're going to need to really promote. And I'm saying this as someone who comes from a library background where, 10, 15 years ago, I was like, they're coming for us. And they were like, no, no, they're not going to come for libraries. And now there's legislation out there that is like librarians can be jailed if they give your kid the wrong book. So like literally in several states. So like being aware that it is there. And again, I don't think it's going to take your job. This is every time I've tried to use it, it's like talking to your dumbest friend, right? Like, like you get the drunk history version of whatever it is that you want. It is not coming for my job, but
That might be, side note, one of the best shows ever.
yeah, kind of,
Drunk
kind
history, yeah.
but like, do the people above me know that? What is the expectation? So also selling the profession and making sure that other people are aware of what we do and how important we are. And I think that we're kind of seeing ramifications of procurement in the news a lot recently. and ramifications of poor procurement in the news a lot recently. So I think that in a way that kind of helps us because it's like, well, why don't you cut corners? You know, and so that's been a thing. But, I would also say if you're in a position to advocate, start advocating for for the for the future of our profession.
Absolutely. Here to that. So we've touched on some learning for a second. So how do you leverage tools like LMSs, microlearning, AI tools, and other technologies to make procurement training more engaging, accessible, and scalable?
Um, we have talked, like Emily mentioned, we've talked about putting all of that um, onboarding stuff online. That's actually something that I'm working with. We have a new communications director, so her team's going to start. They've started gathering stuff, so we're actually going to put it in our LMS. Now that we have an LMS, they were trying to figure out some way to use like our backend SharePoint system. And it's like, well, but they would need a password. They would need, it's like, no, the LMS is a website. It's a SaaS solution. Just give them, their work email and we'll get them the information that way. We have a lot of information in our LMS, a lot of documents not even necessarily ours, that we can that people can access. We try to break it out by class, but every class they get their own slides and all the materials for the class. But also, if you go to the documents, there's a whole extra bunch of stuff that you get. We don't have access to LLMs. I'm not super familiar with AI. We do use Articulate 360 to develop, and that has some AI features. The most success that I've had from that was starting from absolute ground zero to make a bingo caller for a staff event because I couldn't find one. So, but I was able to actually get it to do that, and I feel pretty accomplished.
Another great use case right there, right?
There you go. I mean, there's nothing more important. Um,
In that moment. Emily?
um,
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah. So Julia, I know that every state does their trainings differently. Some states are fully in person. Some states are fully online. Some states are a mix of both. And we're one of those states that are a mix of both. So I think that for the states who are all in person for their trainings, it is something to consider is to moving those into more asynchronous learning online that people can access whenever they need. And maybe that's where that scalable part comes in, right? Maybe you can't get every credit or credential for that training online, but maybe some of it can come from there and make it a little bit more accessible to people from other sides of the state. We went from only in-person trainings, in-person testing, and now everything we do is online, and we have just optional live workshops that go along with each one of our courses that people can attend. So those aren't even mandatory. They don't even have to take the live ones, but we do record them, and they can always watch them afterwards. It's kind of just a summary of what the course is and a time for question and answers based on whatever that course covers, that topic. And what we do also is we bring in for each workshop one of our SMEs from procurement, from purchase and contract is always on the call. So people get to know the people at purchase and contract, not just the training team on these calls as well. But I think we really need to look at how we can leverage that LMS system or just even an online system in general to allow accessibility to people who are all over the state to get these trainings so that you can get that basic procurement level. So for us, that would be our NCCM, right? Everybody needs to have that basic knowledge, and then we can build on that from there. So and that's the question earlier, was that standardization versus flexibility.
And another great tool is NASPO's Procurement U. Fantastic classes. In fact, when I joined NASPO, going on close to 2 years ago, I contacted my former staff and I said, get online, take these classes. They're, whether it's refresher, information or new, they're so well done. And of course, they're free to NASPO and PPA members. So, and I know that many states have embedded uh, those classes into their own LMSs and training, including North
Yeah,
Carolina, which is fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, we're working on that. Currently our training consists of 12.5 in-person days.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I guess it's 12 full in-person days and then a half day online. So that's like all of our classes that are instructor led have an in-person component. We do teach ethics and scope and spec online as well, but what we just entered into the Procurement U partnership so that we're able to offer those classes as well. And what we're going to end up doing is probably cutting a lot of our classes either down and then blending them into one or two classes so that you don't have to drive from the other side of the state for one day. You know, it's a great resource. Um, but we are looking to make that more efficient because they have good good information that's already static and online, and it's great to access. It's also great for those folks who, we get a lot of people who are sent to like our contract management class who don't do procurement, not at
Mm.
all. And we're doing a 2-day deep dive into procurement, contract management, and the procurement, it's very heavy on the procurement. And these people are like, this does not relate at all to what I do. But if you've got something that's already there in contract management and they don't have to have the procurement stuff, it's a little lighter and they can take it on their own time. Great use for that.
And you'll save some money, which will
Mhm.
make the state legislators happy, right?
Yeah,
So that's good.
hopefully.
So let's pivot to a moment for to retention and career growth. So how can onboarding, training, and certification programs be used, not just for skill building, but also to improve retention and create career pathways?
Um, I think people need the opportunity to grow uh, th- throughout their career. So we've all heard of burnout, but there's actually another side of the coin called bore out. If you are that bored, it creates the same like feelings of anxiety and depression and all of that. So if you get stuck in your role, you actually can bore out of the role. Um, we also now have to remember that we have 4 to 5 generations within the workforce, and each one of those is at a different stage in their career. So we kind of have to meet people where they are. We always, and we've talked a little bit about this before, assumed that growth means moving into management. But I loved the point from the first webinar that not everybody's management. They don't want to be, they don't need to be. So allowing people to specialize is great. If you can do, as we've discussed, we're state government. We can't always do that. Um, then um, if we can give them stuff that, uh, level increases, that sort of stuff, for just becoming a specialist, that would be great as well. Also, mentorship opportunities, all of that. Most of the certification programs that I've seen throughout the country work on like a complexity level. So you get certified to do lower level procurements, and then your next level is your higher level procurements. So building that way is also a great way to do that. Leadership development, everything mixed in there. And then I would also recommend states have some kind of um, recertification program or recertification requirement. And that can be anything from working with a professional organization or teaching classes or whatever it would be. It doesn't necessarily have to be classroom learning, but something to encourage people to continue to grow. I think that the thing that people can do today is sit down and be honest with themselves about where their organization is in people's careers. You may be a revolving door, and that's okay. If you are recruiting young people from college and they're staying 3 to 5 years and learning a whole lot, then you're going to have a really good group of procurement directors out in the field. And you, like Emily was saying earlier, you should applaud that. If someone gets the opportunity to move on and move up, fantastic. Um, it can be scary. It can feel scary sometimes to give someone a lot of training. And we certainly have had people who have gone through very extensive, very good training and then left as soon as the ink was dry on that certificate. Um, so, you can feel like you're getting burned, but I think that the benefits outweigh the risks.
I would say
Yeah.
that you feel a little bit like a mama bear. I had three buyers that eventually became directors at different locations, and one, in fact, became a CPO at the state level. And you take a lot of pride in knowing that they, again, started as buyers and were able to progress through their career to become, the head person, the person they wanted to be. So yes, you lose them to another position. But there's a lot of pride in that as well.
Something that's talked about in that PPA Leadership Academy is that your number one priority as a leader is to take care of your people and to inspire them to do great work. So that starts from onboarding. We take care of them, we support them, we inspire them to do great work, whether it's through mentorship and training or whatever it is. And we continue that. It doesn't just stop after onboarding, right? That continues the whole way through, whether you're doing your continual check ins. And we want them to do great work.
And just a quick point that NASPO has a document that folks can access. I think it's in our research and innovation um, part of our website that has job classifications and so kind of like career pathing that you can do. Examples for folks that want to end up in leadership and for those who don't. So I would encourage folks to, if you're interested in that, to go out and take a look. So in just our last couple of minutes here, let's talk about experienced procurement professionals nearing retirement. And what strategies can agencies use to capture that institutional knowledge and successfully transfer it to the next generation?
Well, I think that a lot of that definitely comes through mentorship, right? If you have that good mentorship and partnership, you're sharing that information as you go along. So it's, again, not just during onboarding, it's going to be continuing through somebody's time on your team. And then on top of that, something we talk about all the time with procurement, document, right? We need to make documentation, document the how, document the why, put it all down because it does get lost. And it would be nice to know, what happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Now, are we going to dig that deep? Right. But just making sure that important stuff is documented, the how and the why.
We probably don't need to discuss pre-internet, but
Yeah.
certainly the internet and beyond. Yeah, like why do we do the things we did? Why was this decision made? And as you said, document and then transfer that knowledge.
That communication.
Yeah. So, Christy, anything else before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think that there's a couple of good questions. There was one in the chat about having support staff who are requesting opportunities to source and how to handle encouraging interests without becoming bogged down in training for people who aren't necessarily doing that role. I would say that this is another opportunity for job shadowing. If you can have them shadow someone on their sourcing team or mentorship. And then also having them take maybe some of the like NASPO classes on acquisition planning, market research. Emily, do you have any thoughts on that?
That was similar to what I was thinking when I read that as well, but also knowing your audience, right? Knowing that person, do you feel like they will down the road make a good sourcing staff? And do you want to put that energy into creating that cross training and hiring from within?
And I also want to, great point, say Robert Price made a comment about his agency offers discretionary pay increases to CPBBs, CPBOs, and NIGP CPP certification. So great for you, Robert, and your agency for doing that.
And Anonymous, what type of AI training are we providing? We actually, before the state locked us down, we actually did have AI on our source selection, or in our so word fail in our classes, specifications and scopes of work. There you go. It was an S. Um, we actually did have that in our specifications and scopes of work class, and we were teaching people kind of how to use prompts, but mostly what we were teaching them is the machine lies. Don't believe the machine. Always double check your sources, always double check what it says. If you're going to use it, make sure you go back and do all of that. Now, the state finally did put a policy in place that said all of that. But if you're going to use it, then definitely double check it, definitely edit. It is your stuff, and you've got to own it.
You're responsible for your work, regardless of what tool you accessed to complete that work. So we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
It concludes today's presentation. I want to thank our presenters, Emily and Christy, for the valuable information they've shared with us today. Thank you all for attending this webinar. It does qualify for one contact hour. So make sure to receive your certificate. You fill out the survey as you exit this webinar. We've also recorded it, and it will be available on our NASPO YouTube page in just a few days, including all the questions that were asked. And also, please remember to check out NASPO's upcoming webinars and the Pulse podcast at naspo.org. So thanks again to our wonderful presenters, and thank you all for attending, and have a great day.